that's me. This is Lindsay Williams, the Date Network of the Family Valley.
Welcome, Lindsay. And then we have two phone numbers, and so their first one is 5088.
Oh, this is May Trom, Community Research Liaison for CCTSI.
Oh, welcome, May. And then
Hi.
the next one is, hi. And then the next one is 0538. Okay, how about 6138? No? And Megan, were you able to join?
Yeah, this is Megan Johnson with CDE, School Nutrition Unit.
Megan?
Mark Kling of the Family Resource Center Association.
Tim Dolan from Chaffin.
Karan Porter, Ghetto Fresh.
Rachel Robinson from Project Engelhart.
Erin Pulling, Food Bank of the Rockies.
Mark Jacobson, Hunger Free Colorado.
Justine Luce, Consumption Literacy Project.
Lindsay Kerner, Hunger Free Colorado.
Era Hesse, Colorado Health Foundation.
Gordon Duvall, Community Research Liaison.
Andrew Stricker with Trailhead.
I'm Kevin Werder with Trailhead.
Carmen Martin with Kaiser.
Lynette Namba with Kaiser Permanente.
Michelle Ortiz, Culture of Wellness and Preschool.
Hi everyone, Maria Saldaña with the Integrated Nutrition Education Program.
Brenda Mendoza with the Cultural Wellness in Preschools Program.
Elise Lubell, Jeffco Public Health.
And Wendy Muschetti, Live Well, Colorado.
Thanks, everyone. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Wendy, who took a lot of the great small work group work that we did last month, and has consolidated it into this document. So I'll turn your attention to that. It should be the third one in that packet. And what we'll be kind of doing is comparing it side to side with the original goals and strategies of the blueprint. So Wendy has taken some of our input and put it into two kind of updated goals that are a little bit more direct to what our work group would do, so that there's maybe a little bit less overlap with the other work groups. And then we're going to talk through some of those changes in potential goals and strategies, and then we can make those recommendations to the governing council. So we do have two governing council members here in Mark and Mark, so welcome. So with that, I'll turn it over to Wendy.
Thanks, Kevin. So just a little bit of background to how we got here. Tim was in our small working group last meeting, and I think that is the only one. Is that right? I think that's it, right, Tim?
I think so.
Okay. Okay, so Tim, just jump in at any time to explain how we got here. So most of you, for those of you who are here, good morning. Do you want to say good morning to the folks who just came in?
Yeah, we can do
good morning.
We can do some fresh introductions for you both if you've had a chance for just sharing our name and affiliation, if you don't mind.
Greetings, Beverly Grant. Just here to talk about food access.
Cool. Thanks for joining us, Beverly.
Hey, I'm Jess Harper. Jess Harper with Metro Caring.
Thanks. Welcome, Jess. Did anybody else come in, or was that about it? Okay, cool. Wendy?
Sure. So for those of y'all who were here at the last meeting, we broke up into those work group goal 2 and 3 small groups. And so Tim and I and a few other people, we broke up into what work group 2, basically. Goal number 2 is what we broke up into. We decided we wanted to kind of focus on that work group goal and revisit the strategies a little bit as they were written and just make sure that they all made sense to us and they seemed clear. And the process of doing that, we felt like we really had to just start with the goals themselves. And that I think it was Tim that very wisely pointed out that the way Goal 2 had been written actually sounded pretty much exactly like a vision. So it was pretty unclear to a lot of people what specifically we were talking about. And then Goal 3 had been written a couple different places in a couple different ways in a couple different places. In some places it called out community food assistance very directly, and in some places it called out community-based organizations. And it became apparent, I think, in the last meeting that there's a lot of confusion about what types of strategies we're really talking about with these two, and that, so I took a stab at rewriting those, and I should have we actually had this in a Google Doc. I did send this out to our small work group that met a month ago, so you'll see there's some additions here. I should have had draft written all over this. This is just like a first stab at like, is this language in the right direction, right? We're not saying this is like the final language we should adopt, but are we actually getting to articulate this a little bit better? So what we have here is the vision is exactly the same, and then we're trying to clarify the two goals a little bit more. And then let's not go into the strategies yet. We may maybe even break up and do small group work around those if needed. But so the goal 2, and here high level, this is what at least our group and I sort of took from this, is that Goal 2 is really around places anyone would go to purchase food, right? And that could be school, it could be a corner store, it could be a grocery store, it could be any place where you go to get food, and it could be that you have assistance to buy that food, right? But you are going to select and purchase food for yourself. So that's what we're talking about in the community food environment, whereas we took Goal 3 to mean really the community food assistance environment. So this would be food pantries, food banks, meal programs, locations where you go and are provided food. So the way we tried to rewrite that is that Goal 2 would now say, again, completely draft language, ensure that all Colorado communities have a diverse and accessible mix of food vendors and retailers that consistently provide affordable, nutritious placeholder foods. And then Goal 3 would read, ensure consistent availability of nutritious foods at community food assistance sites. Again, these may not be the right words, but we're just trying to clarify what we mean. I have been coached by CDPHE to actually use the term food vendor as much as possible. It is the most all-inclusive term. Like, for example, relying on, say, healthy food retail is pretty narrow and excludes a lot of places where people actually can purchase food, which is why I put in there food vendors. So do we want to just take one at a time and see how this fits? So the rewrite of Goal 2, is this how other people were imagining it or thinking what we were talking about? Does this make more sense? Do we need to be more clear?
Wendy, would you mind if I just added, just because I was in the group?
Please.
So I think, just to add on to what Wendy said a little bit, I think what we were really striving for is some refinement of what we kind of already think we know, not necessarily a rewrite to change any sort of direction, but just to give some more clarity around what we're doing. Is that right, Wendy?
This is really small feedback, but I like that you added consistently provide affordable. The addition of consistently, I think it's great.
I think this is really clear and really helpful, so thank you for doing the work on this.
Does anyone have any edits that they would make to the updated goal?
I prefer the word nutritious. It looks like you're up in debate about nutritious or healthy. I would go with nutritious over healthy.
I vote nutritious over healthy.
Yeah, me too. I think healthy is too subjective.
Does there need to be any use of the word access in there to make sure that everyone in those communities has access to those stores? To those food vendors or to those community food assistance sites?
Probably. I struggled with wording this one, to be honest, which is why I let it have a diverse and accessible mix. Yeah. And it could be we're not even leading with the right action verb here, right?
Accessible is fine with that.
Okay, but yeah,
I wasn't here for the conversation, but instead of, and this may be a big change, so feel free to throw out, but the consistent distribution, instead it feels like, since you're trying to expand the idea of where they can get food, it seems to me like you're building a network. So, you know, expanding the network or something like that, so it doesn't feel like a handout or something.
So I'm missing, is there some place where it says distribution, you're saying it should talk about it?
I was looking down where it says strategy down here.
Oh, okay.
Talking about consistent distribution.
Oh, right, we'll get to strategies, I think.
If we're thinking about, okay.
Yeah, oh, but are you suggesting that maybe that goal doesn't reflect that strategy because the goal itself doesn't capture or include issues of distribution?
Yeah, I feel like I'm not seeing like where it feels like building a network, you know, for access.
Is that second bullet, ensure consistent distribution?
Yeah. There it says just consistent availability under the strategy, I guess. So sorry, I was in the wrong spot, but where it says increase the consistent distribution.
Okay, so just so I clearly consistently like the word consistent is what I'm taking from this. I use it all over the place. I'm glad you're okay with it though, because it's all over this. But just so I'm clear though, since we're just sticking with the goals right now, do you have a comment or edit on the actual goal?
No.
Okay, so we'll get into strategies next. But we want to make sure the goals actually, the strategies are reflected in the goal, so we do need to crosswalk this.
I have a question. The way these goals read, it appears that these goals are targeted at things that already exist, kind of, which to improve access, we have to have a goal of creating more access points, especially in the neighborhoods that have the least resources. So can we add a bullet point that focuses on the creation of new food access sites? And then let's see, this number 2, ensure consistent availability of nutritious foods at community food assistance sites. That's kind of wonky language. And I was looking down, but someone was addressing the language here on the second one. I feel that. Let's just, community food assistance sites. That almost sounds like a less than charitable place you can go to get food in a way. And we want to have more respectful language because that's part of the stigma that people have with food access. They don't want to be getting others leftovers, so to speak. So we've already made great strides in that way, but down here where it says culturally, financially, physically accessible, you know, we want I think a different language choice right there would support that is happening even with our language. Okay. So back to my original insertion, how do you all feel about another bullet that focuses on the fact that more access points need to be created, and then this is like a pre-provision, because let's say if people know that there's support available to do this, it will emerge. It will emerge amongst the natural leaders that exist in these areas where the need is the greatest. And so since we're at the top tier with the bird's eye view, then we should be creating bridges to allow for this to happen organically.
So can we just start with goal number 2 and then come to goal number 3 in a minute, though?
So you're saying what I'm talking about is number 3?
Yeah, I should have numbered them. No, so the goals, the first bullet is actually goal number 2 of the work group, of the blueprint.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. I didn't know this was gonna go out to anybody, so. So the top bullet, I'm sorry, guys, was is a rewrite of goal number 2 of the blueprint. And the second bullet is a rewrite of goal number 3 of the blueprint. Sorry, skip that part. So to both insertion though on what is the proposed rewrite of goal number 2, is that, do we think we can handle this with maybe some words about like ensure all Colorado communities can create and sustain a diverse and accessible mix of blah, blah, blah? Or what are some other ideas people have to get at that idea of additions and growth and support?
Aaron? Oh, sorry. Do you want to go, Courtney?
Yeah, I was just thinking, just from a reword, I think it's really important that all communities have access. So I would move access first.
Mm-hmm.
Have access to a diverse mix of food vendors, retailers, such and such.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the access is more important than it to be diverse. So I would put access first.
I was going to suggest the same and suggest, not that we want to wordsmith here, but something like ensure consistent and accessible availability of nutritious food. And then instead of the way it's worded, through community food assistance resources. Because then it's also studying whether or not we have the right locations and distribution. And it's not just distribution, I think it's all about access.
Okay, so you're moving to group goal number 3. Can we stick on goal number 2 just for a minute?
Yeah, that's the second bullet.
Yeah, okay.
No,
We're talking about the first one right now. Sorry.
Okay, and I can write the rest of the work group goals up here, but goal number 1 is work group 1, which is focusing on building public and political will to end hunger. This work group is specifically focused on goals 2 and 3 of the blueprint. So goal 2 right now is the first one on this sheet. Right now it's worded as increase the number of Coloradans who can access affordable and nutritious food in their communities. We have so far suggested to change it to access to a diverse mix of food vendors and retailers that consistently provide affordable, nutritious foods. Goal 3 is increase the number of Coloradans who can access food assistance and nutritious foods through community-based organizations. That's the second part of this sentence. And then this is the suggested update. So right now we're just on goal 2.
Top bullet.
Does that make sense? Okay.
I mean, other ideas of how we can get to Bev's point here?
I was wondering if maybe we could just take a step back and just kind of think about for a second what the purpose of this document is. This isn't really anything, I guess I should say what I think it is. And what I think it is it's not anything to rewrite what's in the blueprint to end hunger or anything like that. It's really just a tool to kind of refine and get to where we want to go. And so we want to get from, in order to achieve the vision, we want these goals, or call them outcomes. And in order to get those outcomes, we're going to implement these strategies. And then presumably these strategies have some sort of initiatives behind them that get taken. That's what I think it is. So while I think, yes, we should be as careful on the language as we need to be, but at the same time, I think we want to be cognizant of the fact that we don't want to overdo it. That's just my opinion, by the way.
And this will go to the governing council. I mean, there are already goals 2 and 3 already out there published in the blueprint that we perhaps might not be proposing to actually reword. But I think to your point, Tim, is we're just suggesting this work group, I think, clearly needs some clarity and direction about because the strategies are going to be all over the place if we don't have clear goals. So you're right, it's just a tool, I think, for the work moving forward. Of just like, do we get what that goal is saying? And then the governing council can maybe even finish wordsmithing, as long as I think we agree. Is this the concept? Are we clear what the concept is? Is that my getting?
I guess that's more of a question for me than a statement. I'm just wondering if that's what everybody else's idea of this is.
Like a hide. Does this feel like a helpful exercise just so we can actually then get into the nitty-gritty strategies and know exactly, make sure the strategies actually reflect and implement the goals?
I mean, that makes sense.
And this is like everyone's least favorite thing in the whole world, right? Do I have to rewrite a vision and a goal statement one more time, 1 year later?
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
Did you change then from the goals here where it says increase to ensure?
And which one? Are you looking at the strategies?
Yeah.
Okay, can we just stick at the goals just for one more
Or
minute?
no, I'm sorry, not the strategy, the goal. Where you say, like on 3, it says ensure consistent.
Oh, right.
And then I just noticed on the old goals, it says increase. Those are, 2 different.
Yeah, you're right.
To
I don't know why I
inform
did that.
strategy, if we go back to what you said, is the idea to increase or just to ensure what it is?
I would like to kind of comment on that. I think to increase does not necessarily ensure that everybody has access. I mean, if I just add 1 to it, we've met our goal. And I don't think that's our goal.
Right?
So I would say to ensure that everybody has access, more so than to increase. Because like I said, I mean, if we just add a half an apple to it, we've met our goal.
So what if I put all Coloradans here? Ensure that all Coloradans have consistent availability of nutritious foods at community food assistance sites, and we can, to Beverly's point, we can adjust this language.
Yeah.
Maybe, do you think, Beverly, like, you were saying, like, points of food access or something like that?
Can I just make a comment? I really love that.
Hold on.
But to say ensure all Coloradans, that feels more visionary than actual probably an outcome. And I'm wondering if it might be better to, once we've gotten down to the strategies and initiatives, to also attach some performance indicators, like how many, how many, what's the increase in sites, what's the increase in percentage, what is that, what does that look like? So we have some sort of hard figure, but I don't think we're necessarily there yet. But what I would like to avoid is sort of making the things that the grasp, the sort of nuts and bolts things that we need to do sound really aspirational and visionary, because I think we already have that in the vision.
Okay.
And this is kind of piggyback off that concept, but I just want to make sure that the metrics also follow what the goals are, and that we're not completely changing the vision of the goal, because then that changes the blueprint as well.
Yep.
So I appreciate the refinement, but if they were really looking to increase the number of Coloradans, and there may be metrics already in place to do that, we just want to be cognizant of that, because then it would change how we define success.
Yep.
So I also know I have a very specific niche of, obviously I'm interested in increasing healthy food access broadly, and otherwise that my niche is really focused on kind of the role that food plays in a healthcare setting. And so my participation in this particular working group is focused under that goal number 3 for increasing Coloradans who can access nutritious food through community-based organizations, and I interpreted that as doing some policy work as well as some systems level change in that healthcare setting. And so I know group number 1 is focused on building political will and kind of the infrastructure in that policy setting as well, but how I interpreted that and what, and maybe my place should be in a different working group, so I'll put that caveat out there, but making sure that we're figuring out the systems efforts that need to happen, so that way our friends at Kaiser can set the mold to make sure that everyone's getting food insecurity screenings in a healthcare setting, or if it's at the school settings that folks are going to as well, so that way we recognize that need that there is in the community to then provide connection to those community resources.
I'd like to, Lindsay or Aaron, does anyone have ideas about how we could maybe word or change that community food assistance? How do you guys talk about it? And check my assumption as well that goal really is around where food is provided, perhaps typically at no cost, right, to people who need it. This is food banking, food pantry, meal programs. This is what this is all about, this goal. So I think we should check that. And where do you fall? This is a good, we're gonna have to muddle through this one. But if that is true, then how do you guys talk? Yeah, how do you talk about it? How do you frame it?
Oh, sorry, I was kind of Sorry, I was kind of stuck on the third gentleman's remarks because I got to thinking, it is counterproductive to do a lot of wordsmithing if this is already set. It's when you take it from paper and put it into practice that would count. And really, that's what I'm focused on. So that's why I was like, maybe I'm gonna dial back and do a little more listening, but because, no offense, but I don't want to do a lot of wordsmithing at the bird's eye view, because the air and the ground are always disconnected. And my work is on the ground and in the soil and with the people. And so my views and remarks kind of come from those vantage points. So that's why I say and I appreciate the lady, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but you're further exemplifying my point, meaning your view is your view. But the common strand here is that we know this is a need, and we want to work in an alignment through which we're achieving it through all of our spheres of influence. So we're hoping that this is a uniform platform, I guess, through which we could do this. Is that okay?
Yeah. So we want to get there fast, I think, and just clear this up, because this is my little observation, and I feel like I walked into this and now I got to be the bad guy, because I'd rather just get some, done too. Is that it seemed like the lack of clarity in these goals were actually taking more time. It was holding this group up, and we were wasting a lot of time, because when we got to the strategy level, they were all over the place. Which goals were they advancing? What are we talking about? So I'd rather get this done and clear so we can actually get to work. Even though this is the least part of fun of it. So, but yeah, I mean, wordsmithing, we can punt that to the governing council, as long as I think conceptually we understand what goals 2 and 3 really are saying. And I think goal 3 is probably maybe harder to articulate, to be clear about what that universe is we're talking about. So for the rewrite of goal 2, though, does this feel right that we are talking about food vendors, food retailers, where people purchase food? This is about ensuring that anywhere in the state, that community food environment is providing affordable, nutritious foods, where people go to find and purchase food. Is that conceptually right? Because a whole load of different strategies than when you're talking about food pantry work. Are you rewriting this? Did you just nail it? Because I heard you working through this.
Well, I heard what Beverly was saying, and I agree. I mean, when you're not paying for your food with assistance, you just go to the grocery store. So I was just thinking, why not have it say, ensure consistent availability of nutritious foods in communities, period. It doesn't have to be at a site. You don't have to have no label on it or anything. It's in the community, period. However you get your food, because I'm imagining, even like living in a rural area or in Georgia or something, you're not necessarily going to a grocery store. You might just be going down the street. At the end of the block, there's a man who has a stand with a whole bunch of fruits and vegetables. We're not calling that a community site. We're not calling that a food bank or whatever. We're just calling that access to food. So I just see it as availability of nutritious foods in communities, period.
Go for goal 2, but then why, wouldn't that just be both of them then? Because food pantries also provide nutritious food in communities.
They do.
So do food vendors, but the strategies are very different for both of those. That's where I get.
Wendy, it sounds like you're trying to differentiate between goals 2 and 3 on purchasing versus not purchasing. And as long as that's the clarity that people are okay with, that goal 2 is about things that relate to purchasing food. It could be a local stand at the store where you purchase it, but it's different than receiving, donated food either through like a Meals on Wheels program or a food pantry or the program that y'all do at that's I think what you're trying to distinguish, right?
Yes, which I think was what the point was of these 2 different goals, but. That's what we need to check. If that was not the point. We need.
Sorry, I just wanted to point. So this is like the overall vision of the blueprint in the blue is it envisions that all Coloradans have access to affordable and healthy food in their community. So we want to be more focused in that, but also not have, I put the other 3 goals of the blueprint, not have so much overlap with those goals that we're duplicating work.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the idea in my mind, but Lynette, do you want to?
The goals should be clear, they should be specific to some degree, right? It can't be the vision.
Then, I mean, I would leave it because I heard what you said, but from the community level, we do identify these certain places as a site to get food.
Yeah.
You know, just, and so I get that. So I would leave it.
So goal 2 is pretty, the top, goal 2, what was the top bullet on here, is generally in the right direction. Maybe the second bullet, so the rework of goal 3, maybe we just need to work on how we describe community food assistance, as it's called here. So it's less wonky, we just say what we're talking about.
Yeah, a food access point is fine.
But that is also a grocery store, so that confuses me more.
But at the community level, see, you don't access food. You go to the grocery store or a farmer's market in your world. And in the worlds that I pass through, it's about access. And you delineated it beautifully. Access really is either about purchasing it or receiving it in a respectful way, however that happens. So, I mean, that's really the access right there. So if we leave it generic, a food access point is a pantry, a grocery store, a farmer's market, anywhere you can get food. It could be a church, it could be the library. It's wherever the food is available for you to access.
I mean, we could just make this into one goal, and then we need to define that it's all of those points. And then we need to realize, however, though I think, I mean, this is where it's, I mean, this I'm way, I don't know, someone else is more responsible for this than I am right here. I just volunteered to do this. But,
she'll be on in a minute.
that'd be great. Is that,
Jeez.
then what I imagine is that is still a super broad goal, right? It's not that specific. And the thing is, when you get into improving, like the nutrition and the accessibility and all the different kind of sites, they are very different strategies, different partners, different financing, different distribution, different everything. So the strategies are going to be super specific. So maybe that's okay. So maybe there's a group of strategies that become, you know, little subcommittees or different groups. But the goal we all share, I mean, that is broad and unifying. Totally. So we could get rid of 2 and 3 and just make it number 2, and we have one goal. And just be clear about what we're talking about. It's an idea.
I don't know, I would suggest that we leave the 2 goals like we have them, but realize that goal number 3, when we get to the strategies, is going to be broken down into these different ways that people access through these different access points, be it a food bank, be it a grocery store, be it the farmer's market,
but
be it the man down the street. But each one of those could be their own different strategy to fulfill our goal number 3.
But the grocery stores and farmers markets, as written, would fall under goal number 2, because that's where you purchase food.
Okay, so those other access points could be broken down and identified in their own separate strategy. This strategy is going to identify this access point, and B access point being different than A, we'll identify that one in a different strategy. But I think that we can deal with the differences in number 3 in the way that we develop different strategies to address those differences.
I think what Mark said about purchasing versus non-purchasing, is there a considerate way to incorporate that? Because that makes it so clear, and the strategies are different for those 2.
Yep.
So I would like to, A, advocate for keeping the goals separate, and B, find a way to include those terms.
Just be super clear.
Just be super clear. It's more helpful.
Yeah. I'm going to echo that. I think keeping the 2 goals makes more sense in terms of breaking out different strategies to address those 2 goals. But so probably goal 2 could remain fairly as it's written on the screen. Goal 3 probably needs some wordsmithing to make it clear that the food access points, or if we stick with food assistance sites, make sure that it's clear that that is non-purchased, not paid for. you know, keeping in mind that we want to use respectful language around that.
Yes.
Thanks, Lindsay.
like-
Let's wait a very.
Oh, I like how you said it in the beginning, Wendy, you know, it's where people purchase food and then, yeah, where people are offered food. But yeah, it's something really simple.
Does anyone on the phone have any ideas?
Please,
Sorry.
yeah, someone. You also used the term community food networks. That I thought Wendy, you used it.
Someone smarter over there did.
I like that term too, as far as being considerate and respectful.
But it's still about where food is provided and not purchased. Yep.
So that would be the food access points changing to community food network, is that right?
I like that.
Okay.
So, I mean, like, how old am
I was
Yeah.
just hoping maybe we could call upon the folks from the food banks. What is because we want to make sure that the language is not confusing to what we're trying to get to, right? And I just don't want to throw out a term like community food network and have that not be, you know, something that's relatable to what we're talking about.
Right?
Yeah, I would suggest resources instead of sites or network. And it's not necessarily an increase, but just because, you know, we can have food pantries we do that we're working with that are a block apart, but each of them function for 3 hours a month. And so we don't need more of that, but we need better collaboration and just leveraging the resources and where we put our resources. And not necessarily at those sites, but through those resources, because then that's inclusive of home delivery as well.
So it seems like some of the confusion is that this could be too broad where people in the general public wouldn't really understand what we're talking about. So maybe would it get too messy if we just had like a sub bullet under this that said community food networks or resources could include, and then all of these things, churches, food pantries, so that people have an example under that, but it's not within the goal itself. Would that maybe be helpful?
Kind of like how I footnoted food vendors.
Yeah.
But yeah, yes, the language, community food assistance resources, I think we need to be clear.
So, I mean, one of the things that hasn't been mentioned, but I would assume it's falling under goal 3 is community gardens, gardening. Those are, you know, food resources in communities that people can access to make sure they have nutritious food. So that's kind of an open question. Is that falling under 3 or somewhere else?
It's a great question. I mean, if it's, I would say if it's like a gardening network that's like produce for pantries, that's clearly goal 3, because it's about a distribution of food that is provided. But if it's about like a youth gardening network that has a youth farmers market stand for sale, it's goal 2. Right. That's tricky. And honestly, I don't feel like the blueprint actually did a very clear job of actually talking about food production and distribution. So we are running up some boundaries and barriers that we did not create.
So maybe an example would be like revision, right? So goal 3, I thought, was about empowering community-based organizations that are working in that space. One of them would be like revision. Now, the question there is it only about empowering an organization, or is it about empowering people, individuals? And I just don't know that, because I'm not sure. I think that remains to be seen.
For consistency, I might suggest, instead of having a 3A, there's a footnote for number 2.
Okay.
You could have a footnote for number 3 explaining what community food resources might mean.
Yeah, I don't use a lot of footnotes in my work. Could you direct me where are those on here? But we can add this all in after as well too, but I hear you. Yeah. Thanks.
Just so it reads the same.
Sure. Yep.
Oh.
Definitely.
What is Heidi saying?
Right, so like down below it says healthy food is defined as, et cetera. So we can do that also for community food resources are defined as. I might also suggest that we maybe, if we have a good understanding of what we're kind of getting at, that similar to what Bev suggested, that we all go out and talk to our folks that use our resources and ask them what they'd like for them to be called, as that might provide some clarity on sort of just language around it and dignified experience. But as long as the folks here in this room at least now have sort of at least a nebulous idea of what we're going for, I think that might be our next step in helping us to move along.
Thank you. Okay.
And I think, is it fair to say that we could offer these up to the governing council and also even seek some maybe guidance and feedback of things like, oh, what about strategies that encourage, you know, self-sufficiency through food production? Where do those go? Is it okay to pass that back up? And you all saw Heidi's comment?
So that says, from a food assistance program standpoint, such as WIC, it is helpful to clarify between strategies for venues where food is purchased versus where food is distributed.
So is there anyone that feels less clear now?
This is Lindsay on the phone. I think it's these two goals are, you know, we clarified it by saying purchasing and not purchasing, but then I'm also thinking, you know, I'm down in the San Luis Valley, and we have the San Luis Valley Local Foods Coalition, and they are a nonprofit that exists to help bolster the local food economy. So they're kind of playing into both 2 and 3. You know, they are I would call them a food resource, but they also work really directly with food vendors, you know, the farmers in the area. So I don't know. I think that this line is not a very clear.
I think what we're driving at, if I'm not mistaken, is to make sure these are broad and inclusive enough to include everything that we might want to do. It's when we get to the strategies that you all will be able to give a great deal of feedback to any strategy or course of action that the governing council is trying to make to implement these, and specifically tell us whether they're good or bad or not, and give us coaching and guidance as to how to make them better as we go about doing that. In my mind, the key thing here is to make sure these don't limit us in having as many, being able to take as many strategies as possible to make this happen.
Are there any other questions or concerns or comments about generally where we landed with 2 and 3, about kind of making a proposal to the governing council to clarify these in this way? Anyone feel uncomfortable doing that, moving these forward, or just not there yet?
Okay, well, with that, should we move down into the strategies? I think we have made some really important distinctions here that were maybe not as clear before. So I know it's gone through a lot of wordsmithing, but I think we've made progress, and Mark and Aaron can take this all back to we can all take it back to the governing council and see what they can do with it. So with that, did you want to talk through kind of some of the changes that you made to the strategies here? And just to reference you all, so the original strategies are in that same kind of green and blue headed document, and they're on the second page, so the back of that page. And it would be the how we get there section, I believe.
So the how we get there were the original strategies. And I think one thing that our mini group of the work group last month ran into is that these strategies, I think, were originally intended, if I'm not mistaken here, to actually be separated by goals 2 and 3, but it was sort of this big long list, and so it led to a lot of confusion about, and some of them certainly are cross-cutting, so it led to some confusion about what works where. So what our group did is we separated them. We took what we thought were clearly work group, the goal 2 strategies around where you purchase food, And we've separated those from, and then you'll see on the back of the sheet, the second page of the sheet that we sent out, that I drafted, that then we just moved what we thought actually fit into the where you provided food. Goal number 3 strategies. We didn't mess with those because we were like we were a goal 2 work group, mini group, so we didn't touch those at all. We just moved them out of the way. We're like, we think these are goal 3, let's be clear. And then the third thing we did is we moved sort of that bucket of what we thought, or I thought, Tim, if you totally disagree with me, is that we're just cross-cutting strategies that are just key approaches to implement strategies. That, I mean, you can't talk about increased local collaboration for coordinated and comprehensive solutions. They're not specific to any one goal. That is just how you do your work. So I dumped all those into a third bucket. So what you have here is what we think are 3 buckets. What are the actual goal number 2 strategies, what are the goal number 3 strategies, and what are cross-cutting approaches to our work? And then I'll let the governing council deal with where you want to put that third bucket. So I don't know if everyone, my question is, I guess, not everyone here is as invested maybe as our mini group was in goal number 2. So I don't know, does it seem like does everyone want to look at how we reworked the goal number 2 strategies, or is it like, we can do small group work to do that? Does Erin on the phone, does she kind of want to talk first about how we approach the work groups? I just don't want to drag everyone into goal 2 strategies if it's not why you were here today.
Yeah.
And I certainly don't want to wordsmith.
For Erin, sorry, she just texted me. So Erin's down in Colorado Springs at the Health Equity Advocacy Conference, and she's presenting on behalf of the Blueprint. She intended to join at 10:30, but it got a little bit delayed, so she's going to be on closer to 11 at this point. So it should be just in about 10 minutes. But
so can I just go ahead and beg the question?
Sure.
About the work group? Yeah. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong here. Is this one work group? I mean, I think that's the question. If this is the direction of goals 2 and 3, in your minds, is this one work group or is it 2 work groups? Is there a goal 2 work group and a goal 3 work group? Because
I think they're separate and they should convene together. Yeah. Because you have the paid and the non-paid, but they still need to talk.
Yeah.
Yeah, for some context, like originally, this kind of predated my involvement on the Blueprint, but both of them had the word community in them. So they're like, community, that just goes together. But then when you look at it, that doesn't really make sense. So that's something that I think has made us kind of spin our wheels a little bit because it's just so broad that, we can't really boil the ocean here with all the access and community. So I don't know.
I say yes. With one thing that I'm kind of getting hung up on, I know that some community-based initiatives that are food sharing and also food selling. And so there could be actually some dovetailing. So I do see how it makes sense to be separate and being together, but there may be some initiatives that really overlap.
Like, I think Lindsay on the phone was pointing that out. He's in the same, absolutely. What do you think? Are we one? Are we 2? Are we siblings of the same parents that get together every now and then? Yeah.
I think we're one group, but since we're a big group, maybe it makes sense to divide and conquer.
Yeah.
I think it goes to the nature of the blueprint itself. In order to really have true and consistent change in a community, you need to address both of these. And the question then is, are we better off addressing them together or not? But clearly, they both need to be solved at a community-wide level to have effective change.
Maybe just from a structure standpoint, I like the idea of 2 groups, but then they work together. So it could be that the 2 groups, and I'm not married to this, just throwing in an idea, like, we have these monthly meetings, maybe they meet separately monthly, but come together quarterly or come together 2 times a year to identify those opportunities for alignment. But it is a really big group, and I think it has created challenges around getting stuff done.
And there are kind of already some things happening like that. So Workgroup 1, which is focused on building public and political will to end hunger, they're splitting for June and July into subcommittees focused on that whole marketing campaign to build the will, and then another one focused on existing SNAP or WIC marketing materials. And so they're meeting separately for June and July, and then they're going to come back together in August. And this was the first week that we did that, but it worked pretty well so far. So there's some precedence for that, I guess.
So back to trying to operationalize this, if the governing council does have questions, it would seem to me it would be easier to go and ask a more narrowly defined group, can you work on this problem for us? Because if we just have either the purchasing or the, food assistance, one or the other question, taking it to a smaller, more defined group with greater expertise in that area, I think makes some sense.
To your point, we in this group have different expertise based on that goal. Some people have more expertise in goal 2 or goal 3. So I think it would make sense for us to separate, to Darren Kevin's point, monthly, and then come together quarterly.
I agree with that too, and I believe that the separation will also point out the alignment. For example, Kaiser. Now, the funding that you have done in communities has created a lot of offshoots. For example, I'm working on an offshoot right now in the coal community. Now, we're creating more food access by empowering people to grow at home. But it's a network of, we have the sunsetting share is involved. Neighbors Together, which is under that, which is going to be the more resilient outcome of that collaboration. Metro Caring. Then we have some other very small community or entities involved. But what's going to happen is they will receive education, they will receive everything they need to get started, literally, the soil, the seeds, the start, and the box, and education. And so when you have a complete wraparound, it takes a collaborative effort to do that. But see, Kaiser was a part of that, and you didn't know, because it's way down here in the soil on the ground, and so then also thinking about someone along here was speaking to about metrics and how we're measuring the outcomes. That's the actual outcome, these people that are doing that, but how would you even know about that to count it, as an example? Then here's another thing that I want to plant the seed with all of us. In Denver County, we have that Residential Sales Act. That is going to create a major shift. It's taken time. That Residential Sales Act allows people to grow and sell at home. So I am a part of another cohort of folks that we're making in our business that neighborhood by neighborhood, block by block, we want to get some growers that in turn turn into access points. Then we want to keep going up the food chain. So once that's established, then we want SNAP at these access points too. So people can walk around and tool around their neighborhood, go over here and get my eggs, go over here and get my vegetables. Create a seasonal, local, walkable network. It's a culmination of all the things that everybody's talking about. But when you, like I say, take it from paper, put it into practice, who the heck knows? All the intricacies. It's a web that really gets implemented. And it's a myriad of relationships, it's a myriad of resources, but they came in alignment because of the goals to work. So I hope that was not too murky, but just throwing things out there.
I want to do a backflip. Yeah. That's right. So it sounds like too, no matter what we do, even if we decide to split up for a little bit, and come back together, that there is a vision that we're all working towards, that is real life on the ground, and that's what's going to keep us going together, right? Is that this is what we want to build and see everywhere we go. So we can keep coming back together and report together and use each other and weave each other together. You are the best community weaver I've ever met, Beth, right? Is that we're going to get there, but we may have to spend some time apart so we can actually do some brass tacks, right? Like actually really clarify what is it, what are our top priorities, what are we going to get done so we can make some change happen, or support some change from happening, or promote some change from happening. Is there anyone that feels not super awesome about splitting up 2 and 3 so we can just have some time to focus and really hammer out these strategies and work plans and then come back together quarterly, I think is what Dara suggested. Does anyone not like that idea? Anyone on the phone want to chime in?
Hi, this is Megan Johnson from CDE. I'm just wondering, so as, you know, somebody that's representing schools who have both assistance and the opportunity to purchase food, like where would someone like me fall in if we're talking about splitting it up?
I would put you all under goal 2. That's me, this is Wendy, because I mean, school, as you know, an incredibly critical point of community food access, but food is purchased. So even if it is purchased with federal food assistance, it is not provided. It's not, does that make sense?
But some,
right, that's what I was thinking too.
Or they would have both.
Yeah, I mean, like schools that may also have like a food pantry or, so that's okay.
Okay, yeah, I think it was coming at from that point of view as well, because I mean, you have to get the food from somewhere. So ensuring access to nutritious foods is probably a great strategy.
Is there a issue with just keeping the meeting the way it is and just sort of dividing up during the meeting and then coming back at the end? I'm thinking that way, if somebody decides, geez, I'm not really supposed to be in group 2, I should be in group 3, they can move easily. Because
do we want to maybe try that right now and get down into the strategies and do that for maybe 30, 40 minutes and see how it goes and come back together and feed out, and then we can have Erin go over some of the other topics at the end? Would that work?
Yeah.
Mark, did you have something to add?
Work for folks on the phone, is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, with that, yeah, it's always kind of the tricky part. If it seems like the room next door is open, I could work on getting that set up really quickly, yeah.
That does make longer term participation seem maybe a little easier if they're actually separate meetings, but unless we can always have 2 rooms and 2 Zoom numbers.
We could do that, yeah, that would be possible.
So do you want to, folks on the, oh yeah, go ahead.
So we could do,
Sorry.
no, I'm sorry, go ahead.
If we are going to split up, since these goals are pretty closely related, I think it would be important. This is my first meeting, so I'm not really sure of the structure, how it's gone before, but to have 1 or 2 individuals, and so it would be at different times, to have 1 or 2 individuals that are on both groups, so we make sure there is like consistent communication and back and forth, so we are not duplicating efforts. And you know, if group 3 comes up with a good idea and group 2's already been doing something similar, like there's somebody that can kind of facilitate that exchange of information.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think today, so like I could go with one group and maybe Wendy goes with the other one to split it up. We could use a breakout room where the audio for the second one would just be on my computer, which we'll just do our best to ensure that everybody can hear us clearly and that we can hear them. But that would be one option.
Sure. Is there a difference in size? Tell me if it's a bad idea, but should we really quickly take a poll to see who would go to 2 and who to 3? So like the bigger group stays here if you're in a smaller room?
Yeah, sure.
So folks on the phone, could you just type in really quickly if you would go to 2 or 3 today?
And then a clarifying point while we're doing that, I would suggest that the distinction should be, because this came up, how about reimbursed services? I think the distinction should be who is paying. I would suggest if it is the consumer paying for any model, that goes into the purchase model, where if it's like school-based setting. But however, if it's an entity paying that it's not the consumer, that would fall into community-based resources. Does everyone agree with that?
Mm-hmm. And federal food assistance, like if you're paying with SNAP or WIC, or you're a participant in free and reduced meals, you go into goal 2, right?
Actually, group 4 or group 5.
I'm sorry,
That was one thing I was going to point out, is that like group 5 does focus a lot in the schools, and I don't want to be like, oh, this is not the right work group, but because we want to ensure collaboration across work groups too, so there's a lot of value to that.
But goal 2, I would think, should include, and this is what, there's our strategies in there too, about like, are you SNAP and WIC authorized, right? Are you maximizing use of those federal systems? Does that make sense?
Like, for instance, at Food Banks and Rockies, we do older adult food box distribution, about 7,000 people a month. It's not paid by the consumer, but it is reimbursed. So that's a paid, but to the consumer, it's free.
Yeah, so that'd be goal 3, right? Because you use an entity reimbursed by the federal government, right? Yeah. We're gonna totally muddle through this. And I don't know if, I don't know if it matters so much either. If like, well, there's some fuzzy points, so there's some crossover, so some organizations and staff to both. I mean, we'll figure it out, right?
So I would say, one thing, it's kind of fuzzy right now because it's sort of at the very high level. Like once we identify particular strategies and projects, then you bring people together around those projects, it'll be a lot clearer. People will know kind of which project makes sense that they want to be part of making happen. It's just about how do we get to there, right? But it'll be there, it'll get there.
Totally. So we have, are you looking up of the?
Yeah, I just wrote those down. So,
And then do we just do like a quick 2, 3 around the room so you have a sense? Is that okay? All right, Jess, we start with you. Goal 3.
2.
Oh, 3, sorry. I'm paying attention.
3.
I would say 3. But I could do 2 if we have too many 3s. I mean, I don't, we need to split them up.
3. 2. 2. Oh, I thought the 3s were gonna have it. But actually save this.
Cool. So Erin is on now, and so we have about 53 minutes left. So we could either, I have a couple suggestions, try to split up now for about half an hour and then come back, or we could formulate the next meeting like that. We could do the first hour separate and then the first hour together and feedback, something like that. What would you all like to do in the room? I don't want to have it like so short of a time period that we can't really accomplish much.
Right.
Which is kind of in the July meeting, yeah.
Me too.
Okay, cool, right. And I want to say, like, I know Donna had a whole plan for this meeting and we're just kind of, I found out last night at 10 o'clock, so we're just kind of going on the fly. So thank you for bearing with us. And thanks, Wendy, for your help. So we'll do that. So I'll point it to Erin, who I think is on the phone. And thank you for all your awesome feedback on these goals. I think, like I said, I think we made a lot of progress here. And then the next meeting, we'll kind of be able to jump right into the strategies. And once we get some examples of projects down, it'll really help clarify things. So with that, Erin, can you hear us?
I can. So can you just, I couldn't hear you great when you were, can you all hear me, first of all?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Sorry I'm late. I just wanted, can you reiterate what you talked about as next steps for this group?
Yeah. So just a whole recap of the meeting. Wendy led us through kind of the changes that she had made to the goals. And we did a little bit of wordsmithing there, and then we had people elect to either separate it into goals 2 or 3. And then for the July meeting, we're going to start the first half of the meeting in those separate goals, and then reconvene in the second half of the meeting as one whole group.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. So I just wanted to provide a quick update to you all, kind of close the feedback loop. I heard from a number of work group 2, 3 participants in the survey data, and I've also met with a number of you as well. Getting a little bit of feedback. Are you all, or just me?
Just you.
Just you. Okay. All right. I will try not to listen to the echo of my voice. So I think really just, again, wanted to share back the input and the feedback that I got from all of you. I think there were some really strong themes in that. So really heard from a lot of you that, you know, having the space to kind of think through these goals has been a really big benefit of the blueprint. So the ability of the blueprint to kind of bring everybody to the table has been really valued. And I think that there is a sense of urgency around moving to action. It feels like people are have started to get a little bit frustrated with the conversations and kind of the lack of clarity around kind of where we're going and roles and responsibilities for the work groups. And then it almost seemed like there was a little bit of while there's urgency around moving to action, a lack of readiness for implementation. So, and I think that goes back to the roles and responsibilities conversation of what exactly are people signing up for, and how is funding going to flow. So there's a lot of questions that I think we're still working on unpacking. But I wanted to talk with all of you. Kevin and I had a conversation with Donna last week, just around kind of taking a quick pause so that when we start to move, we can move faster. But based on where you are in next steps, I would really love to get your input on that. If you have some next steps for a meeting in July and think that will be really beneficial for your group, we can absolutely do that. What we had discussed as a potential recommendation was really to think about setting up some site visits over the summer. So I would lead that and be doing those site visits. So probably at least 3 or 4 between late July to the end of August timeframe, where all of you would be invited to come and participate in site visits and really thinking about, we haven't fleshed out the structure of what those will look like exactly, but really getting some experience data for this group to be thinking about. So getting out to rural areas and visiting sites who are directly serving those experiencing hunger, really thinking about getting some education around food systems in different neighborhoods across the state, looking at some examples of best practices. So really just kind of like getting out there and doing some of these site visits over the summer, and then doing a kind of reconvening the full group together in September, but potentially reconvening those groups. And again, I want your thoughts on this, reconvening those groups around work group 2 and work group 3. So really having a group that is separating out the 2 goals and bringing together qualitative, quantitative, and experience data to really have that group consider to be able to identify some strategies within each one of those goals. So again, I think it feels like a little bit of a slowing down, but for us, when we were talking about it, felt like it might enable us to move more quickly. I also would align with the Colorado Health Foundation's funding opportunities that they have out right now and that they're making decisions on. So they are going to be funding 10 to 15 local food policy coalitions across the state. They're also hiring a contractor to provide technical assistance and evaluation and coalition building support to those contractors. So I think we'll have a better idea by that September timeframe of what work is being funded across the state. Not that there's not other work that's happening outside of the Health Foundation. So I guess in a really broad way, and I asked a lot of questions and gave you a lot of information in a very short amount of time, but I would really love to get your thoughts, number one, on thinking about kind of pausing for the summer so that we can really compile data, again, quantitative, qualitative, and experience data, so that we can do kind of a systematic review of information at that meeting in September and really dive into how do we start to prioritize out some strategies, is the first question. And then the other one would be, does it make sense to reconvene in kind of a work group 2 and work group 3 group versus keeping both of those 2 goals combined? I think one of the other things I heard really clearly in the feedback was that the mission of work group 2-3 feels like the mission of the blueprint. So want to be really thoughtful that we're not tasking this work group with too much. since I'm on the phone and I can't see all of your faces, I can see that there's people in the room. Any thoughts on that, those two questions?
Well, we dealt with the second question already, right? Oh, right? Okay. Sorry, Erin, this is Wendy. We dealt with the second question already, so we can update you on that, but.
Great.
What other comments on the first question?
This is Jess from Metro Carrying. I'm wondering if we would lose momentum if we paused for that long, and if there's any work that can be done in the meantime, not to discount the importance of data collection and prioritization of, you know, strategic moves forward, but there's certainly work to be done on the ground in the meantime, and if we can kind of align with that at least. Question mark?
Could we do it simultaneously? Could we do some site visits that are options, that if some of us want to go check out other stuff going on? I would love to go see what other people in the state are doing, just as a person. So maybe it could be both.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we recognize that we're very metro area focused, which is a problem if we're trying to work with all Coloradans. So that would be one option, but also, so like Workgroup 5, which focuses on maximizing child nutrition, they're doing summer meal site visits tomorrow, actually. And so the idea was to do them in Denver, Greeley, Arvada for an hour, go have lunch at those sites and see how they function, and then reconvene over Zoom with the 3 sites to debrief after it. So there would be an option like that, where we either do one large field trip or multiple ones that later reconvene over Zoom and debrief, but I think it's a great idea, so.
I would be willing to do either of those things, but I would just echo that I'd hate to lose the momentum by just not having some sort of meeting up.
So the next meeting is scheduled for July 31st. Should we go ahead, we'll maintain that meeting, is that, or do we want to vote on it?
So this is Erin. I mean, I think it sounds like you guys have a pretty clear next step for the agenda for the July meeting. So that also changes what a recommendation might look like. So that's, yeah, there's absolutely no opposition to continuing to meet. I just don't want people to feel like they're continuing to meet and aren't having a productive forward-moving conversation. But it sounds like there are some great next steps that came out of this meeting. So we are more than willing to support that.
So maybe, let me go to the chat first, sorry. Did you want to, yeah, go ahead, sorry, go ahead.
That's all right. I would just like to say that I think that we should keep our meeting that we already have scheduled, but if there's a possibility between now and that meeting, that we could go and visit some of these that we were talking about. And if we can just set that up, and then that would, maybe the discussion could be added on for the next meeting as well. But within this next month, before our next meeting, if we could even schedule that, that would be great.
Does anyone have a site where they would like to host people?
Probably all do, right?
Okay, sorry,
I have a suggestion, but.
go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lindsay Williams is on the phone, so I'm sorry that I'm kind of nominating you, but I think the Food Bank Network in the San Luis Valley would be a great site visit.
Yeah, I was saying, come on down. We have 15 food pantries in the San Luis Valley, so we could maybe, you know, visit kind of the hub in Alamosa, and then visit either like 1 or 2 other pantries. The hours are all different. It would be beneficial to see the even more rural sites in Alamosa.
Okay.
Yeah, and can I add too, I think there could be, people really want to spend a good long day. Lindsay, on the phone, to your earlier point too, I mean, seeing the food hub, seeing some of their new retail sites, there's a lot you could do across goal 2 and 3. Alamosa just won a summer meal site award from the USDA. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff across a lot of these goals. You could have a really rich day down there.
Okay, and if I heard you correctly, that was to do that like before the July 31st meeting, was that right?
I think, yeah.
Okay. Did you, sorry, no?
Well, I was just gonna ask if there would also, if we could combine, is there anything happening in the San Luis Valley that maybe isn't a part of our table right now, but where they're growing food locally, so we're getting at both goal 2 and 3?
Absolutely. There's some incredible, Lindsay, you can speak to this more, sorry, but there's some really incredible production sites you could see, of all sorts of scales, easily,
There was a couple suggestions over chat that were written, so I want to also make sure we check those out. But Lindsay, did you want to go first before we do that? Sorry.
I'm sorry, I think I didn't hear the question that was being asked.
So we were talking about more kind of non-food pantry, more so where food is grown sites to visit in the San Luis Valley, in addition to like any sort of food pantries or a food bank.
Yeah.
Farm parks.
Farm parks,
Okay.
that I would suggest as well, yeah.
Cool. So Heidi had mentioned a benefit to having a pause would be to give us a chance to fully populate the blueprint asset map in terms of what is currently happening, planned, or funded, and to make sure that work groups, which may not have personal knowledge of all these projects, could be more productive with new strategies, but she's okay with either approach. An update to that, in the pre-meeting email, I did send out kind of a more cleaned up, consolidated version of the asset map that has, it's probably close to 60 assets from all the work groups. So that would be a potential benefit. Amanda is being super nice and put out an open invitation to come to the Western Slope. They have a 100-seat classroom, full AV capabilities, new 30-seat teaching kitchen, and you can help harvest produce in the morning, meat in the afternoon, and then also visit the summer meal program lunch blizzard, which could cater. And Garfield County also.
You're on the way to Amanda.
Also, I'm not exactly sure what type of data that Erin was referring to, but as long as you're doing asset mapping, there might be an ability to map what kind of data sources are out there also.
And Heidi, this is Wendy, to your point too of, when I think someone over here said too, we could do both, right? I mean, site visits like this is a beautiful way to do asset mapping in a way, blended with some good data. But so Heidi Hoffman, I'm talking to you. I think if you're cool with this, I think moving ahead and doing both at the same time, like a mix of site visits and pulling some data together. And my guess is that I'm now actually super excited to dive into our goal 2, right? And get down to we really refine these strategies. I think we have a good path forward. But I think we can look at these strategies, finalize them, and at the same time say, okay, what is it we really need to know about these, right? Now that if we really feel clear about these strategies, I think that will help drive us, like saying, okay, we need some more data and more understand the assets around these. Does that make sense?
Would it help to do something before the next meeting, like a Survey Monkey, where we list all the strategies on there and you all are able to go on there independently to either make suggested changes to the strategies, or if you want to even do before that, do prioritization of the strategies of what you think should be either most important or most feasible? I don't know. Those are a couple options of things we could do between meetings, but.
Might be better to do that in the next meeting, is to do that prioritization, have a group process. Work group 4 just had a process that worked. I think this is the start of a process that worked well and had an outside facilitator actually from CDPHE that helped guide it. Might be good to think about that, as well as having some folks or someone to help sort of guide a prioritization or strategy development and prioritization process, just so there's some kind of path forward. But I also just wanted to echo what Wendy was saying. I think once you have specific strategies in mind, then it's easier to gather data related to those strategies, because right now it's like gather data about everything. It's a little too much.
And can I make a request too because it sounds like we're planning a robust next meeting, is if we could have strong representation from the governing council and some of those as well, because where I get tripped up when we talk about prioritization is, like, who are we prioritizing for? Like, are these going to get funded? Is the blueprint going to invest in these? Like, who's moving them forward? So, I mean, I can tell you what I think you should start doing, but then if the blueprint, you know, the governing council comes forward and says, actually, we want to invest here or there. I mean, there's a who's going to do this with what kind of money behind this that I don't understand. So it makes it hard for me to prioritize. That's out of my own little myopic perspective. So I would say, please, very strong governing council representation in those that can guide us and tell us actually what's going to happen once we prioritize them would be great.
So this is Erin. I mean, I think that's a completely valid point and question, and I think that's something we, in terms of next steps around the governing council, we are doing a retreat, an all-day retreat sometime in August to really hash out kind of roles and responsibilities and how the governing council is going to function. So I think that's just a basic piece of infrastructure that, again, we've noticed, and that was the kind of part of the roles and responsibilities conversation. But absolutely, I think we'll have that information come August. I don't think we'll have it for July, but I think that doesn't mean we can't have a productive conversation in July and do kind of prioritization at that meeting in August as well.
And Erin, to Mark's original point when we were talking about like work group 4 and the prioritization that they did, do you think we could reach out, and is there interest in the room from an external facilitator like Gina who helped with that work group, and she just did it in a really structured way that seemed to make progress, but.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Is that something that you all would find helpful? Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
Help us.
Please help us. Like, could we, I don't know how much time people have, but could we possibly take July 31st to be the road trip, and then we reconvene in August to do the work? I just don't know do people have time to do a road trip and meet once a month? Realistically, this summer?
I mean, I think having,
so
this is Jess again. I think having that time would be great. And realistically, I think if some of us can go, then that's wonderful and can report back. I wonder also if there is a way to connect with those folks at those sites by paying them to come and spend some time with us here. If that's not realistic for everybody to get out and do that, if we can get some representation and really provide the right and fair accommodations for that, it could be a workaround for not being able to take off work or take off an entire day to get to the Western Slope.
I want to go on the field trip really bad, but I will be out of town on the 31st.
So that was only just thinking through logistically with this on a Wednesday, and if we're traveling quite a bit, like that's kind of so we might want to think about doing it on like a Friday or something like that, where it's maybe a little less time taken up in the middle of the week, because we want to make sure we can dedicate like a full day to it or something like that.
I agree with Wendy, though. I think it would be hard to have a full day site visit and then come back July 31st and also have a 2-hour meeting. So I think we do one or the other. For July, yeah.
Do we, Erin?
Just gonna ask too, if we're gonna do traveling site visits, if we can schedule those at least 2 to 3 months out.
Okay. Do we want to take a vote on this, what we do in July? Should we do, does that work for everyone? Mm-hmm. Okay. Should we do a hands raised for those who want to meet in July and then potentially site visit in August?
I'm not available in July. Travel, even too much more.
Right?
Yeah, and for the meeting,
Exactly.
we would still, have the whole Zoom if you're able to join that way. But I didn't quite get a chance to like tally the numbers around the room. So the options would be to meet in July together like this, first half in separate work groups. Well, not separate work groups, but separate goals, and then reconvene in the second half of the meeting. August would be the field trip. Or the second option would be to flip that around, field trip in July, meeting in August.
Well, who's available in July?
Yeah, can we?
Because I'm not available in July, so I wouldn't
Okay.
have a choice.
Would you be available for a meeting instead of like a full day site visit? No,
No, I'm
neither
gonna be
one. Okay.
So this is Erin. I just want to put one hybrid option out there, but we could also do, so the original idea was that we would plan multiple site visits. I think trying to get everybody from this work group available on the same day between now and the end of August is going to be difficult, to say the least. So we could have also like 3 or 4 different options for site visits that people could sign up for that would be on different days throughout those 2 months.
Yeah. I like that idea, because then you could do some local, and then if those who can't travel and get away because they've got their hands in the soil, then that would work. Yeah, I like that.
I think it would be great if we did that, because we are looking at asset mapping to make sure that we're asking the same questions and taking the same data back from each of the site visits to inform the group.
And Erin, I'm assuming you're doing this across all the work groups. I mean, like, for example, what Amanda and Dana presented here would be perfect for work group 5 for site visits. And we would love it too. So are these like, hey, any work group, we're setting up a series of site visits kind of approach? Is that accurate?
Yeah, so we haven't had that conversation with all of the work groups or the work group chairs. Work group 5, again, is doing a site visit this week to a school lunch site, or sorry, a summer meal site. So they have kind of arranged their own, but yes, I definitely don't think this is going to be only X people are invited to our site visit. I think, we could invite all of the work group members, and can think about, I can talk to the other work group co-chairs about the idea as well. But yes, I think it'd be great for all the work group members to be invited at the very minimum.
Is there a chance we could have any of those field trip days in July, even that last week, for those of us in the school system where August 1st gets crazy?
Yeah.
Within the metro area?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like one option in that last week of July in the
Sure.
metro area.
Is there anyone that would be interested in hosting that? Just recognizing that most of the kind of options we had were outside the metro.
I mean,
Safer places.
Since we're thinking of visiting multiple sites in the San Valley, I would have to talk with Liza Merritt, who's also, she's in another work group, about, her. But I mean, potentially, yes, the San Luis Valley would work in July.
I was just going to say, I like the idea of spacing it out, and maybe the San Luis Valley is a little bit farther down the line, and then more of us can plan to go and be there. And if we can't, we could coincide the meeting. Maybe it's like Facebook, it's lived or something, like we bring the video in so everybody can see, because bringing people here to tell about what they do with a PowerPoint is so different from us being there, or people being there with videos and sharing it directly.
Okay. So there was quite a few comments that came through on the chat while we were talking. Megan's having a baby in July, so congrats, Megan. The Western Slope has a presence in Work Group 4 and a lot of capacity to host multiple work groups. Garfield County as well. And then Amanda said, I think if we do site visits, we need to have some pretty clearly defined learning goals so that the host sites can make sure that we facilitate it as best as possible. So I guess, and I know I'm supposed to be like neutral here, I'm trying to, but what I would maybe suggest is that I would like to do it as soon as possible, but it sounds like we would have some things to plan out logistically and to get it on people's schedule. So maybe we continue with just the work group meeting that we had planned out for July 31st, and we'll be bummed that some people won't be able to join, but then we'll talk about August or September as a site visit. Would that work for everyone? Okay, cool.
Does Erin have anything lined up or potentially lined up for July?
For visits? Erin, did you have any site visits lined up for July that people could join?
I do not yet, but I plan to. So I'm happy to send those dates out as soon as I get them, understanding that that's going to be a really tight turnaround for people. I also chatted in, and I'm not sure if you got a chance to read this one out too. The blueprint can cover travel costs for site visits. So just know that in terms of being the ability to participate as well.
Yeah, and I want to also mention that when we talked about, I think it was Jess that talked about people coming here, we can cover travel costs for that as well. And so things like mileage, lodging, stuff like that. So you can reach out to me if you or anyone that you know is interested in that, and we can coordinate.
And Kevin, Dana had to jump off, but she just texted me, they're happy to host in August or September.
Okay, cool.
In Garfield County, which, I mean, she's only an hour from Amanda too, so there can be a combo there maybe.
Great. Erin, was there anything else that you wanted to add about the agenda items that we had for you? So I can pull up the agenda again for you. So we had the work group governing council rules and expectations. We talked about the future work group composition recommendations, and then we did talk about summer meeting plans. So Erin, anything that you wanted to add to that? Any of those three?
No, I don't think so. I just really appreciate the discussion. I'm glad that you guys hit on the kind of work group composition recommendations. I'm looking forward to hearing what those are. And we will go ahead and move forward on getting some site visits scheduled, but also keep the meeting for July 31st. So that's great. Thank you all.
Cool. Well, if it's okay with everyone, I think we could wrap up a little bit early then. Is that all right? Or is there anything else that you wanted to talk about first?
Can I ask a really stupid clarifying question here? Just to make sure, because I might be the only one that was confused, but maybe not. I was told that the meetings were on the 4th Wednesday of the month, but it turns out they're the last Wednesday, because there are 5 Wednesdays in May and July again. So I just want to make sure is that clear? It's the last Wednesday of the month, not the 4th Wednesday.
Oh, thank you for that.
Because that's why May, I was like, I can't go, but it was actually the next.
It is the last Wednesday of every month, yeah. And I mean, that's something that we could change to if you all would like moving forward at any point, but.
I don't care. I just want to make sure I wasn't the only one that was really confused by that.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, so I tried to write down everybody's names frantically for the 2 different goals, but I didn't quite get that done in time. So one last suggestion I would have for you all, if you could please just put your first name, last name under each one of those if you're more interested in goal 2, which we kind of just broadly defined as things where purchasing was involved, and goal 3, not as much involved with purchasing. And then you all on the computer, if you could just send me, I know quite a few did through chat already, and I think I captured those, but if you didn't have a chance, feel free to chat or email me. Anything else? All right. Well, we'll see you all on July 31st. Thanks.
Thanks, Kevin.
I gotta meet with Amy, and that's where she's at.
I've been there one time. Hi, Linda, sorry. Yeah.